Well, that was Prime Minister Modi speaking at the East Asia Summit today. And well, we have Siddhant Mishra joining us on the broadcast to discuss all that Prime Minister Modi has spoken about at this particular summit. Siddhant, a very good morning to you. Well, we just heard President Modi, Prime Minister Modi speak on a lot of these issues. And firstly, he's mentioned about the comprehensive strategic partnership that had taken place last year in 2022. Let's throw some more light on that to set some context for our viewers.
Well, yes. So India is doing a lot when it comes to ASEAN nation, and perhaps Look East policy was started in 1990s. But when Prime Minister Modi came to power, India announced Act East policy. So the strategic partnership was elevated to comprehensive strategic partnership between India and ASEAN nation. India and ASEAN nation are cooperating or perhaps coordinating in the fields of digitalization, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, education, green growth, territorial disputes. And I would also put this in context with free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific, with which India always talks about, and even Prime Minister just mentioned in his opening remark at India-ASEAN Summit. So that is the center of the relationship with the ASEAN nations, and the relationship with ASEAN nations, the ASEAN grouping is the center of India's Act East policy. And Prime Minister once again reassured ASEAN nations about it. Also, when it comes to territorial disputes, then India stands in solidarity with the nations like Vietnam,
Free.
Cambodia, Philippines. Yes.
Right, Siddhant. Also, if we are to speak about the geopolitical situation as well, Siddhant, what more can we bring out from whatever the Prime Minister said at this particular summit? The geopolitical relations and the scenario right now and the narrative that is being set and projected out.
Well, yes. So there are key agendas that are going to be discussed in this India-ASEAN summit, which is right now going on in Jakarta. The one is going to be situation in Myanmar. The other is going to be trade. They are also going to discuss the territorial disputes, especially few days ahead of this particular summit. China has come out with map overlapping with the territorial claim of countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia. So that is also going to be discussed as leaders are meeting for the first time. So India is committed for free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. We have defense cooperation with countries like Vietnam. And India is perhaps doing a lot when it comes to Indo-Pacific. Also on ground, if we talk about, then Indian ships are making port call to Papua New Guinea. They are sailing through the Indo-Pacific. They are going to Australia. They are doing military drills. Then when it comes to the ASEAN countries, then we have a defense cooperation with each one of them. So India very well understands the importance of these countries, and this is perhaps the reason that between all this preparations which are going on for G20 Leaders Summit, Prime Minister decided to find out time to go to Jakarta to attend this summit in personal capacity and to return to India. And in fact, Indonesia has also shown a gesture by arranging the two meetings of the Prime Minister back to back, so that he doesn't have to waste time and perhaps can immediately fly back to India because of his commitments for the G20 summit, as leaders have already started arriving in the national capital. So this particular visit is very symbolic for Prime Minister, and since we were talking about trade, then we have free trade agreement with ASEAN. In 2009, the trade agreement was signed for goods. Then in 2000 and later, it was signed for the service sector. We have a great understanding with ASEAN. ASEAN is India's fourth largest trading partner. We are coordinating in various sectors other than defense. Defense. We are coordinating in pharmaceuticals, health, agriculture, education. So there are working groups which meet time and again, and perhaps India has always shown greater interest when it comes to ASEAN, and this time around again, where other countries are being represented at the level of foreign minister, at the level of vice president. India is being represented by Prime Minister Modi. It itself establishes the importance of ASEAN for
Right.
India. Back to
Right,
you.
Siddhant, right, absolutely. Now, to continue the conversation, I'll also bring in Abhishek, who's joining us on the broadcast right now. Abhishek, a very good morning to you. Well, Siddhant just mentioned about the symbolic importance of the Prime Minister's visit to this summit. And if we take forward the conversation from there, he has been constantly bringing forth the point that India has become a representation for the global south, firstly that, and the narrative of how this is the time for all the Asian countries to come up and set the narrative for the rest of the world, set an example for the rest of the world. How are we looking at that?
See, with India engaging increasingly with ASEAN, it's important for India's own economic good as well for India's regional security concerns as well. In the whole of ASEAN or the Indo-Pacific that we call, the countries have expressed that in ASEAN should be the centrality of Indo-Pacific. That becomes very important economic and strategic area where many countries, many emerging powers as well, like India, Japan, USA, Australia, China, are competing for their dominance. China, of course, has a huge maritime boundary in this region, and there has concerns also with its expansion nature. We have seen Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, all expressing their concerns with the latest map that China has released. So Chinese side, though they are very powerful, they are very impactful in this region. Their dominance has raised some concerns among the countries. So countries like India, USA, who are trying to engage with ASEAN, could also become a long-time partner with ASEAN, being one of the most vibrant region in terms of production of textile goods, manufacturing capacity, chemical capacity, a small industry that this region holds, and in exports across the world. So the trade importance is very high. Population in this region is very skillful. Employability is very good. So this is also emerging as an upcoming manufacturing hub that can actually compete with China and counter Chinese dominance on the global economy. So in that context, it becomes really important that India is also trying to engage with ASEAN countries. Of course, there has been centuries-old cultural and people linkages. So there is a commonality also between our culture and more engagement with India, more of India and ASEAN, we cement those cultural ties, which will reflect in our
Right, right, Abhishek, definitely. Quite a few crucial points you've made there. And right now, we will show you some visuals of the Indian diaspora welcoming Prime Minister Modi in Jakarta. And we've seen the kind of excitement and the enthusiasm across the world wherever Prime Minister Modi visits, the kind of welcome, the grand and the warm welcome he receives from the Indian diaspora in all these countries. And these are shots from Jakarta. Remember, Prime Minister is on a jam-packed schedule right now, and this is how the kind of welcome that was given.
Ladies, and we love Modi. So we are so excited to meet him and to welcome him to Indonesia. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, madam.
Yes. जी हाँ जी hello namaste. Welcome for Mr. Narendra Modi to Jakarta, Indonesia. Welcome to Mr. Narendra Modi to Indonesia, Jakarta.
Prime Minister of India.
Yeah. Thank you. Narendra Modi is a great person. Narendra Modi
Right. So those were the welcome shots that you were seeing, and how the Indian diaspora is very enthusiastic and excited to welcome the Prime Minister at Jakarta. And right now we will continue the conversation we were having with Siddhant and Abhishek, both being on the broadcast with us. Siddhant, I'll come to you now. You know, over the years we have seen a lot of policy changes when it comes to Indo-Pacific region, and right now, when we heard Prime Minister Modi's address, he has yet again brought in the Indo-Pacific relations and the importance and the significance of it. How are we looking at that particular dimension?
Well, yes, that's right. So, Prime Minister said that India supports the outlook of ASEAN for a free and open Indo-Pacific, and that has been India's position from very beginning. In 1990s only, Indian foreign policy makers realized the growing significance of Indo-Pacific theater, and perhaps at that time, this policy, Look East policy, was announced by India, giving more importance to India's partners on the eastern side of India. But when Prime Minister Modi came to power in 2014, this particular policy was advanced to Act East policy. So since Prime Minister Modi coming to power, scenarios have completely changed. 360-degree change has taken place in the scenarios when it comes to engaging our friends and partners on the eastern side. And this is perhaps the reason that Prime Minister, despite having such a busy schedule, has decided to attend the 20th India-ASEAN Summit and 18th East Asia Summit in Jakarta. Also, interestingly, given the territorial dispute which is going on in South China Sea, so this particular visit of Prime Minister is coming at a time where perhaps a week ago, China has come out with a map where China's claims are overlapping with the claim of India and the other ASEAN nations like Philippines, Vietnam, and they all have collectively spoken against this Chinese map. They have objected to this Chinese map. So that is one thing which is likely to be discussed during the meeting which is going on right now in Jakarta. Then obviously trade is another key issue on the agenda. India and ASEAN countries, ASEAN grouping has a trade of $135 billion. ASEAN grouping is India's 11th largest trading partner. We have FTAs in goods and investments. We have FTA free trade agreement with ASEAN grouping in services. We have we have elevated strategic partnership to comprehensive strategic partnership, given the strategic importance of these countries. So where India is hosting most of these European Western partners, friends for the G20 in New Delhi, India also wants to send out this strong message that the countries from the east, the countries from the ASEAN grouping are equally important for India. And also India's commitment for free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific is the central pillar of India's commitment to the ASEAN nations. And India-ASEAN relationship is a central pillar of India's Act East policy. So this is the reason that even for few hours, Prime Minister Modi decided to be in Jakarta. He was given a warm welcome right from the airport to the hotel venue, to the venue of the summit. He was received by President of Indonesia. He also had a small exchange handshake with the Foreign Minister of Indonesia, and the opening remark has already been made by Prime Minister Modi. We can expect this one meeting to end, and then there would be East Asia Summit that is going to start, and right after that, Prime Minister will head to the airport and will depart for India, as he has a lot of engagement here in India, since leaders have already started arriving in India to participate in the G20 Leaders Summit. Head of State of Nigeria is in India. Head of State of Mauritius has arrived. So there's going to be series of meetings for Prime Minister Modi, including the bilateral sittings with these leaders from various countries. Given that Prime Minister decided to find out time and go to Jakarta, shows the importance of ASEAN grouping for India. Also, I have been highlighting it that how Russia has sent ministerial level representation to ASEAN. America has sent vice presidential level representation to ASEAN. China, which always sends premier level representation to ASEAN. India is perhaps the only important player, only major country which is being represented by a prime minister, head of the government, who actually takes decision. So this also reflects and also talks how deep our cooperation, India's cooperation, is with ASEAN countries. Also, India is building a lot of infra projects when it comes to ASEAN grouping. India is building trilateral highway with India, Thailand, and Myanmar. India also has trans-border payment mechanism with Singapore, and perhaps that was highlighted by Secretary East Saurabh Kumar the other day while doing a press conference in New Delhi. India has started direct flight with Indonesia. Indigo has started direct flight with Indonesia. So on all fronts, engagement between the ASEAN grouping and India is increasing. $135 billion of trade every year. 11th largest trading partner. FTAs already signed. The relationship has been elevated to comprehensive strategic partnership. So whatever is required for a grouping or a country to be called as a best friend or an ally or a partner, all that has already been done between India and ASEAN grouping, and that makes this particular relationship unique in nature, and that also talks about the importance of India-ASEAN relationship. Back to you.
Absolutely, Siddhant. Definitely quite a few crucial points that you've highlighted, wherein, yes, the one thing that we're constantly mentioning is the fact that while there are other countries that have sent their representatives, India is being represented by the Prime Minister himself and not any other foreign ministers. And right now we also have Abhishek in this conversation. Abhishek, Siddhant just mentioned about the G20 that is also upcoming, and Prime Minister Modi himself also made a mention of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam being the theme of G20. Just if we could go through the significance of this mention within the ASEAN Summit address that he delivered as well. Abhishek, I was just asking you this, that, Siddhant just made a mention of how G20 is also upcoming, and there was a mention of G20 by Prime Minister Modi in his address at the ASEAN Summit, where he mentioned that the theme of G20 is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The significance of that, if we could just delve on that a bit.
Of course, and if you talk about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, this ASEAN region has been mostly integrated with India in terms of, commonness, regional commonness, heritage, culture, people-to-people centric approach. Even if you travel today to Indonesia's Bali, about 80% population practices the Hinduism, and they believe in so many of our mythological characters. There are so many temples. Also, the most of the ASEAN countries, from Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, we have seen so many variety of Ram Leela or the same epic Ramayana and their characters being played in their folktales. So clearly there has been a much deeper connect among the region, and it was just a time when the countries decided to make it more modern in terms of having more trade connectivity, people-to-people engagement, and also ensuring that regional security and regional cooperation is elevated to the next level. Why this ASEAN is important? Because the Indo-Pacific region, where this ASEAN is also situated, holds about 1/3 of the global trade. You can imagine the kind of importance this region has. About 40% of offshore oil and gas reserves are stored in this region, which are still unexplored. Then there are a lot of maritime resources, fisheries. These are the issues that are very much, essential to the economies of these countries, and probably that is one of the reasons why they are very much worried. If China is aggressively expanding its maritime boundaries, their natural reserves, their fisheries, and their fishermen, they will have problems in their day-to-day life, because a lot of their economy depends on how the trade routes are governed, how the trade routes are secured, and how they are allowed to have free and open access to these maritime boundaries and sea routes. About 1 lakh ships every year pass from the Strait of Malacca that connects Indian Ocean with the South China Sea. So these are the kind of some of the reflective figures that tells the importance of Indo-Pacific and ASEAN. These 10 countries, the member of ASEAN, they are smaller in geography. About 600 million is the overall population, but their economic prowess or the economic might is way bigger than their overall population, because India's overall GDP and the ASEAN grouping, if we collect their GDP, is almost similar, and they are about $3 trillion per year. So that is where the engagement between India and ASEAN has been, laid importance upon. As Siddhant was also mentioning, India is trying to connect this region through land routes as well via Myanmar. Myanmar has been politically not so well and so democratically supported in the recent years, but still, with the kind of importance Myanmar holds for India, there has been a typical high-level engagement that India is having with Myanmar. There were issues also with Myanmar's military junta, and then there are certain rebellious groups in the regions. India has been able to ensure the certain Indians who were trapped there, the safe evacuation. Thailand was cooperating India in that. So that also tells how these countries, though with certain differences, the way they govern or rule the respective regions, there has been a kind of symmetry in having a concern for each other's people, each other's trade partnership, and the security and sensitive issues that the countries has for each other. Indonesia is one of the largest ASEAN member country, and which was the presidency of G20 summit last year, and now it is holding the presidency of ASEAN. Prime Minister Modi gets an opportunity to meet with Joko Widodo, the president of Indonesia. Joko Widodo is also going to travel to Delhi, day after tomorrow probably, to take part in the G20 summit talks. And with the ASEAN members holding back-to-back G20. Last year it was in Indonesia. This year it is in India. That also tells that the world's attention has clearly shifted to this region because of its manufacturing capability, because of course, its ability to counter the dominance of the Chinese growing prowess in economic and strategic terms, and also the way this country has become a new emerging hub for manufacturing capacity. Major trade companies are opening their offices in this region. So this region has a lot of potential which was untapped for years, but now in the last decade at least, we could see that ASEAN has emerged as a global stage as one of the major economic multilateral platforms, and India's continuous engagement with ASEAN continues to it will benefit a lot of in terms of trade and
Right, Abhishek.
security to both sides.
Absolutely, definitely. Thank you so much, Abhishek and Siddhant, for bringing in those insight into this conversation and discussion about Prime Minister Modi's address at the ASEAN Summit. And we are only a few minutes away from the East Asia Summit, where he will also be seen speaking. Right now, we will slip into a short break. Do stay tuned to CNN News 18 as we bring you all the latest right here.
Global South की आवाज